Chapter 1. Welcome to the snow. Valentina, Patagonia. Winter -7 degrees, leaden sky, and me, frozen to my soul in front of a glass and stone hut that looked like something out of a Scandinavian fantasy. This can't be real, I muttered, pressing the scarf against my mouth. The Montenegro Foundation was headquartered in a small valley at the foot of a mountain range. Everything was covered with fresh snow. The pines, the roofs, the wooden path connecting the modules of the ecological center, and also my cheap boots, which had already lost the battle against the humidity. The wind cut the skin, as if each gust was dragging small invisible knives, and the silence, so vast and overwhelming, felt like a living creature enveloping you. I had seen pictures, of course. The typical institutional web images, white landscapes, solar technology, very Nordic people hugging trees. But none of that compared to being there. Feeling the crunch of snow underfoot, my lungs burning from the dry, pure air, as each step seemed to plunge me deeper into foreign and beautiful territory. That place smelled of wood, ice, and something else. Possibility. A beginning that I still didn't know if it would be a takeoff or a fall. I had arrived at that end of the world with a temporary scholarship, 4 changes of clothes, a notebook full of notes on water filtration, and an anxiety that danced in my chest from Bariloche. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my bank account number flashing red, my mother's messages asking if I had arrived safely, and the promise I made to myself before boarding the bus. 1 year, Valentina, 1 year, and everything will change. I had left my mother in Buenos Aires, with her medication and her forced smile. She had told me, "Go, Vali, do it for you." But I knew she was also saying it for her. Because if I could get stability, a contract, a contact, something, I could pay for her treatments. I could finally give her a break that I had owed her for years. I could breathe too, without that constant feeling of running after something that always escaped. I pushed open the front door of the administrative building, already half covered with frost, and entered. And that's when I saw it for the first time. He was on his back, in front of a huge screen projecting the outline of a wind turbine. His posture was tense, precise, as if every muscle was on perpetual alert. He wore a dark gray shirt, fitted to the body as if he had had it custom made, and he probably had. The kind of clothes that screamed expensive discretion. When he turned around, the first thing that caught my attention was not his face, which was, in all honesty, that of a Greek sin dressed as a CEO, but his eyes, cold, like the landscape outside, but alive, intense, with a kind of mute fury that made you want to look twice, just to confirm if you had imagined what they radiated. They were the kind of eyes that didn't just look. They dissected, weighed, decided. "Valentina Quiroga?" he asked in a deep, direct, unadorned voice. "Yes," I managed to answer, awkwardly taking off my gloves. "Good morning, Mr. Montenegro." He watched me as if he were measuring me. Not condescendingly, but like someone calculating whether a piece is going to fit into a delicate mechanism. It was uncomfortable, and something else, something inexplicably physical, as if his gaze could alter the rhythm of my heartbeat without even touching me. "I was expecting someone older," he finally said, without changing his tone. I blinked. I was hoping to be spoken to a little more tactfully. There was a pause. He didn't say it, but I saw it. He smiled with his eyes. Barely. A minimal, almost imperceptible gesture. And yet, it disarmed me a little. Just a little. "They're going to show you the lab now. I have a meeting, but I'll expect you at 6 o'clock in the dome room. There is a welcome dinner with the investors of the project. Formal. Bring whatever you've got fancy." "With investors?" "Yes, you are on the Montenegro scholarship. They finance your presence here. It's in your best interest that they like you." And without further ado, He turned back to the screen. I hated it a little. I admired it some. And although I didn't know it at the time, I had already begun to desire it. It was a dirty, annoying desire that settled like a splinter under the skin. Not because of his body, although it was impossible not to notice it, nor because of his gaze, which seemed capable of breaking you if he set his mind to it, but because of what he hid behind that surgical coldness. An invisible crack, a badly closed wound that I, without knowing how, recognized. Elías Montenegro was not only the founder of that institution, he was its shadow, its fire, its best-kept secret. And me, just another intern, with a borrowed coat, wind-dried lips, and a heart stubborn enough to get into trouble. At 6 o'clock, I would go to that dinner. I would put on my usual black dress, and I try not to look at him like I already knew that man was going to ruin my cool. Spoiler. I didn't make it. Chapter 2. The Elijah Scandal. Elias. My last name used to open doors. Now it opens headlines. The Montenegro heir in the shadows of an ethical accusation. From renewable energy to questionable relationships. What is Elías Montenegro hiding? Too handsome to be trusted. Wrote an opinion column that, curiously, was shared more than 1 million times. There's something especially frustrating about seeing your reputation torn to shreds by someone who once undressed in your bed and whispered that you were the purest thing he'd ever touched in his life. Bullshit. Her. And now this. I took a deep breath. The window glass was cold to the touch, but I forced myself to lean my forehead against it. Outside, the snow fell with the same patience with which I tried not to throw a chair across the room. Each flake seemed like a silent taunt, a perfect white doom covering everything. Covering even what could not be hidden. My name stamped in headlines with acid ink. My assistant Lucia came in without knocking. Valentina Quiroga has arrived, she said, checking her tablet. The intern from Mendoza, environmental engineering, top of her generation. She has a letter of recommendation from the University of Oslo. I nodded without turning around. Clean resume? Impeccable. No one knows her in the media. No network traces. She has only one Instagram with less than 100 followers. It's all plants, science, and photos of her mother. Photos with men? Lucia raised an eyebrow, saying nothing at first. Are you considering what I think you're considering? I did not answer. I didn't need to. She knew. You are desperate. I am cornered. The difference was not semantic. It was existential. The phone on the desk vibrated. Message from Andrea, my image lawyer. We have 48 hours before the board revokes the signature with the Norwegians. If you don't clear your name now, you lose the Northern project. And with that, everything. Everything is relative. My family name has bank reserves that could sustain me for 10 more lifetimes. I could retire tomorrow and live as a cliché wounded millionaire. But this project wasn't just about money. It was my redemption. It was my attempt, clumsy, belated, but real, to erase the mud my family had stained the world with. Montenegro Corp was, for decades, synonymous with fossil fuels, pollution, corruption. My father died with oil under his fingernails and bills under his mattress. I swore I wasn't going to go down that road. That's why I built this complex, this foundation. That's why I left behind the luxuries, the yachts, the Rolexes. That's why I buried every previous version of myself, even if sometimes the past scraped up from underneath like a splinter that refuses to come out. And that's why every damn picture of that half-naked woman saying I emotionally used her to get access to her bottom is eating me up inside. Nothing happened with her. But rumors are better than the truth. The truth doesn't make headlines. It doesn't sell clicks. It doesn't generate viral outrage. I need image cleaning. I need a symbol. A human, sincere, structured story. I need a fiancé. Valentina Quiroga entered with steps that didn't seem hesitant, although her face said otherwise. She was wearing gray thermal clothes, a knitted hat, and a military green coat that didn't match anything but somehow fit her perfectly. There was something about the way she stood there that reminded me that authenticity is a weapon, if you know how to use it. Young, more than I expected. Although her eyes, those eyes had history. The kind you don't shout about. The kind that drags. Lucia looked at me. A gesture was enough for her to disappear. I was expecting someone older, I said. By the way, to test it, to see if it would break at the first turn. Her response was immediate, cutting, delicious. I was hoping to be spoken to a little more tactfully. I smiled internally. Most female interns would have hung their heads. She didn't. I liked that. It bothered me too. It reminded me of me, way back when I still thought ideals were more than polished marble for speeches. I gave her the order to be at dinner. I watched her walk away, her back straight, her ponytail somewhat undone. There was something raw about her, unfiltered, something that didn't fit the plastic mold of my last few relationships. That made her useful. Put her in front of investors as a mere companion? No, she wasn't a decorator. She was better than that, credible. And if I was going to ask her to play my fiancé, I'd have to convince her without sounding desperate, even if I was. The snow was still falling, and as I watched her walk away down the wooden walkway, I felt something in me, something I thought was asleep, awaken. It was not love. It wasn't tenderness. It was desire, yes. But it was also intuition. Valentina Quiroga was going to change everything, and she didn't know it yet. Chapter 3. The Indecent Proposal, Valentina. I never liked silent men, because I learned that when they don't say what they think, they are thinking too much. And Elías Montenegro was thinking about me. I felt it that night, in every restrained glance, in every measured sentence that he blurted out, as if every word cost him money. The welcome dinner was held in the Dome Lounge, a warm, glassed-in space with views of the frozen mountains and hanging lights like suspended fireflies. The air was scented with wood and spiced wine. Most of the guests wore formal suits or dresses that looked like they were straight out of European catalogs. I had put on my most presentable black dress, the one I wore to university congresses, the one that concealed, but also insinuated, the only one I had that could pass for formal if you looked at it with enough faith and from afar. I did not know anyone, and he did not introduce me. He just greeted me with a slight nod and offered me a glass of white wine, as if he already knew I was staying, as if no other formality was necessary. "Did you adapt to the weather?" he asked me without smiling. "Easier than adapting to you," I replied without thinking. He turned his face slightly, as if I had surprised him. "Touch, remember?" I said, taking a sip. His gaze lowered to my lips, and that's when I knew I was thinking things I wasn't going to say. The event went off without major incident. I chatted with a couple of charming Swedes, talked about particle microfiltration, dodged awkward questions about my age and role. I felt less invisible, even useful, but the air changed when Elías rested his hand at the base of my back, guiding me toward a side door. "We need to talk," he whispered. He said it in my ear, but I felt it between my legs. It was an electric touch, an unspoken agreement with my body, which responded before my mind did. I didn't answer. I walked with him. The hallway led to a small, warm library with wool carpeting and a bay window overlooking the forest. The lamps had cloth shades and the silence was thick, almost tactile. The door closed behind us. I crossed my arms. He took off his coat with precision, hung it on a hanger, and stood facing me. Upright. Beautiful as sin. "I'm going to say something unusual," he began, "and I want you to listen to the whole thing before you answer." My instincts went into overdrive. That voice could sell ice to a glacier. "Are you going to fire me?" "No." "Are you going to kiss me?" Neither. He said it without moving, but with a shadow of a smile on his lips. I need a fiancé? He continued. The phrase hit me so hard I thought I hadn't heard it right. A what? A stable partner, formal, credible, for the media, for investors, only for a month. I blinked. He wasn't kidding. And why me? I asked with raised eyebrows. Because you are smart. You have no media background. Your image is impeccable. And because when you walk into a room, no one thinks you're acting. They believe you. I laughed, brief, dry, almost hurt. And I'm supposed to agree to feign love for a man who doesn't know how to say goodnight without sounding like an interrogation? Elías did not flinch. I don't need love. I just need you to look like my most personal choice. That others believe you're the balance I've been missing. That you're real. I need them to think I'm settling. What's in it for me? Money. Access to investors. Direct exposure to environmental impact foundations. You can present your Northern project in front of the European Council. And when all this is over, I help you to get the necessary contacts to install your pilot plant wherever you want. I remained silent. My heart was pounding as if it were racing, as if I was on the verge of an irreversible decision. It was an obscenely good offer, and obscenely absurd. What if I say no? I will not insist. What if I say yes? His eyes lowered to my lips again. He took a step closer. He didn't touch me. He didn't need to. The air between us was so charged it hurt. Then we start lying together, Valentina. But not bad, not dirty, nice lying, elegant lying. Nobody gets hurt. We're just being watched. We play. The end. I looked him in the eye. I wanted to scream at him that no, that it was crazy, that I wasn't made for rich games. But I thought of my mother, in her cough, in the hospital papers, in the imported medicines that were bought in dollars. And then I saw him, and I was afraid of what might happen if I accepted. Not for others, for me. Because if I let myself be touched by that man, I wasn't going to want to pretend. I was going to want more, and that, in my experience, never ended well. I'll think about it, I finally said. He nodded. Not a word too many. He let me out first. And that night, as I was removing my makeup in front of the mirror, I found myself wondering how that body would feel on mine, and how hard it would be to lie to my heart with such conviction. Chapter 4. My mother needs it. Valentina. I was never good at lying. When I was a kid, if I tried to hide something, my mom would stare at me and I would blurt it all out like I had acid on my tongue. She called it structural honesty. I call it emotional inability to hold a mask. And yet, there I was, sitting in front of the notebook, trying to convince myself that pretending to be the partner of a man like Elías Montenegro was not a betrayal of myself, but a strategy, a necessary move, an opportunity. The cursor was blinking over a tab with the draft contract. I hadn't opened it. I couldn't. I felt that if I read the whole thing, if I accepted it out loud, there was no turning back. That by signing that paper, something inside me, something more than my principles, was going to change permanently. The connection took a while to stabilize. The Wi-Fi in Patagonia was decent, but the mountain was doing its thing. Finally, my mom's face appeared on the screen, with that warm smile that made me want to cry every time I saw her. She was wrapped in a plaid blanket, her hair a bit disheveled, and her circles under her eyes more pronounced than usual. But she was still her, strong, luminous, invincible in spite of everything. Hello, my love? Hi, Mom. How are you? Congested, as usual. But today the doctor was nice. That's already a miracle. She tried to sound light, almost amused, but I noticed the slight tremor in her voice. My mother suffered from an autoimmune disease that affected her respiratory system. Nothing terminal, at least not yet, but chronic, delicate, and expensive. Very expensive. Imported medications. physical therapy sessions, weekly visits to the pulmonologist. All that, plus the tests and private consultations, added up to more than my salary as an intern could cover. And she knew it. That's why she insisted on pretending. She was an expert at minimizing the urgent, at making me believe that everything was under control, even when the water was up to her neck. "Are you eating well there?" she asked, changing the subject. "Yes, there's soup. Lots of soup." "What about the place? Is it like in the pictures? Cooler, more beautiful, more intimidating? What about your boss?" I swallowed. Elías Montenegro. The name alone ran down my spine like a shiver. Intimidating as well. Handsome? More. What? Am I forbidden to ask if your boss has a Norwegian model's face? Stop watching soap operas? She laughed. She coughed. I clenched my fists. It was that kind of dry, deep cough that doesn't come out with ginger tea or drugstore syrup. It was the kind of cough that needed that damn 30,000 peso aerosol spray that the Social Security didn't cover. "I'm fine, Vali. Don't make that face," she said, as if she could see me. "You already did me the favor of getting the scholarship. You're already there. That's the important thing. The rest will fall into place. The doctor said that if you don't start the new treatment this month, you may have another relapse. Yes, well, but we're not there yet. You're coughing like you're smoking bricks, Mom?" Silence. A long silence. One of those that not only hurt, they make you sink. "I don't want you to change your life for me, Valentina." "Too late for that," I whispered. She smiled, as if she knew everything and said nothing. As if she always knew everything and just let me decide in my own time. We said goodbye with kisses thrown across the screen. When I cut off, I stared at the reflection of my face in the notebook. There I was, 29 years old, a graduate degree that no one was funding, an environmental project that no one wanted to hear about, a mother who depended on me, and a man with an indecent proposal that could, with a single signature, open all the doors that had been closing in my face since I was born. It was simple. 1 month, one lie, one piece of paper. I could do it. I had to do it. I took a deep breath. I stood up. I took my field notebook, tore out the sheet where I had jotted down some ideas for my technical presentation, and wrote something else. Conditions for Elías Montenegro. He doesn't touch me unless I ask him to. He doesn't sleep with me even if I hint at it. He does not control my agenda. He doesn't humiliate me in public. When this is over, it's over. No complaints, no consequences, no confusion. I folded the page with surgical precision, and I prepared for the real onset of winter. Chapter 5. The Rules of the Game, Elías. She entered the office with a folded sheet and a steely expression. And I knew in that instant that she had accepted. Not because she told me so, because she had that particular glint in her eye, that of someone who has just decided to betray something inside herself and is pretending it doesn't matter. "I have conditions," she said without preamble, leaving the paper on my desk. "If you accept them, I'm in." I watched her silently as she sat across from me. She was wearing a navy blue sweater that looked softer than it should have been legal. Her hair tied back as usual. No makeup. And yet the whole room swirled around her presence, as if the air knew she was there, as if the silence obeyed her. I took the sheet. I read, one by one. He doesn't touch me unless I ask him to. He doesn't sleep with me even if I hint at it. He does not control my agenda. He doesn't humiliate me in public. When this is over, it's over. I smiled inside. She was so methodical, so careful, as if the heart could be armored with a 5-point checklist, as if it could write its salvation in the conditional tense, with straight margins and firm handwriting. "Is there a problem?" she asked. "Yes," I replied calmly, putting the paper down on the desk. "Just one." She tightened. tightly. Her fingers closed into a fist on her lap. That tiny reaction was enough for me to confirm something. She was afraid too. Not of the deal, of me, of what she couldn't control. The last clause. No consequences. No confusion. Her eyebrows arched. She leaned forward slightly, as if that word stung. And that bothers you? I find it naive. To think that there will be no confusion, that we can control everything, that nothing is going to get mixed up. I can. I said it with a coldness that I liked too much. You can't? We remained silent. The kind of silence that does not ask permission, that settles between two people who understand too much without speaking. She held my gaze as if challenging me to a duel, and I felt like kissing her violently, but I didn't. I accept your conditions, I finally said. She nodded, tense. She stood up to leave. Valentina, I stopped her, just before she reached the door. Yes? There is something I want to add. A clause. What is it? I stood up. I walked up to her. I stopped just inches away. I did not touch her, but I let her feel the weight of my presence. The air between us became thick, almost liquid. If I breathed harder, I brushed against her. During this month, I said, if someone is watching us, if there is a camera, if there is you, I continued, rubbing your back, an investor nearby. I'm going to look at you as if you were my wife, and I'm going to do it so well, no one will doubt it. Her breathing became shorter. She didn't look down. Not a millimeter. And if that means rubbing your neck, grabbing you by the waist, I'm going to do it, without asking your permission, because that's what's expected of a real couple. And when no one is looking, I don't touch you. I don't get close. I don't say a word more than necessary. She opened her mouth to respond, but did not. She just nodded. Slow, steady. She left without another word, and I stayed in the office, with the paper still on the table, her rules, my clause, and an erection that had no right to exist. Chapter 6. First night together, Valentina, silence has form, and in that cabin, it had the thickness of a secret and the weight of a naked body. When Elías opened the door and let me in, I knew it wasn't just any hotel room. It was a trap with hardwood, dim lights, large windows overlooking the forest, a burning fireplace and a carpet that begged for leather instead of shoes. Everything smelled of cedar and danger. The kind of intimacy designed to be shared, but not by two strangers with a contract between them. There are 2 rooms, he said, as if that solved everything. I'll take the one on the right. Perfect, I replied too quickly. My backpack fell to the ground with a hollow thump. I bent down to pick it up and felt his eyes on my back. I didn't look at him. If I did, I was going to confirm it. That tension had settled between us like a third presence. Alive, stubborn, still. It was ridiculous. Nothing had happened between us. Not a touch, not a kiss. But his mere presence upset me as if my body already knew things that my mind still refused to process. I got into the room. Large bed, white bedding, window overlooking the snow, Scandinavian touches, minimalist, elegant. Everything was serene, like a postcard of emotional balance. But I was in knots. Too elegant for an intern with a fear of failure. Too comfortable for someone who had a notebook full of plans and no guarantee of a future. I locked myself in the bathroom. Toothbrush, towel, cream on my hands, cold water on my face. I tried to dissolve into routines, in the little rituals that sometimes trick the body. But then I heard it. The dull sound of water hitting tiles. Shower. He was taking a shower. In the next room. And the water pressure was good. Very good. I closed my eyes. I hated myself a little. But there I was, my heart racing and my mind drawing images I didn't want to have. Elías wet, droplets sliding down his chest, his back, his hips, hands in his hair, his jaw tense, a body that seemed designed to break promises. I sat on the bed. I breathed. Hard. 3 breaths. 4. I wasn't going to become one of those women who fantasized about their boss as if that was normal. This was a deal. A transaction. Nothing more. But then I came out of the room and saw him. Gray pants, black t-shirt, wet at the neck, wet hair, and barefoot. I swear I'm not a foot woman, but there was something about seeing a man like that. Sans shoes, sans tie, sans his infallible businessman's shield that left me cold. Something vulnerable, something real. I left the bathroom free for you, he said without looking at me. Thank you. I ran into the bathroom as if fleeing from an ambush. I closed the door with more force than necessary. And when I was brushing my teeth, I felt something strange in my chest, like a longing, like a nameless anticipation, a restlessness that had nothing to do with fear, nor with desire. It was something else, as if something in me was preparing to lose control. That night, I didn't sleep, and it wasn't because of the mattress. It was the silence, because of the soft footsteps in the hallway, by the faint creaking of the wood, by the fact that, in the next room, a man who couldn't touch me was dreaming of touching me. And so was I. Chapter 7. All eyes on us, Elías. There is a subtle but definite difference between feigning affection and touching a woman as if she were really yours. That night, I forgot. The main hall of the foundation was lit as if we were expecting a wedding. Hanging lights, crystal glasses, soft string music. The scent of wood, of freshly opened white wine, of wildflowers brought from a nearby greenhouse. Every detail screamed refinement, balance, purity. As if the entire event was designed to wash away the history of my past mistakes with Nordic aesthetics and Swiss protocol. The Nordic investors had arrived that morning. 2 Swedish brothers, tall, blonde, skeptical, and a Danish engineer with sharp eyes and a clinical nose for falsehoods. They moved around the room like inspectors disguised as philanthropists. They spoke little. They observed everything. They needed to believe that I had changed, that I was no longer the oil heir, the scandal with legs, but a new man, stable, with values, committed. That's where she came in. Valentina. I don't know what I expected her to wear to dinner. But it wasn't that tight black dress with long sleeves and open back that clung to her body like a confession. It wasn't that steady walk with her ankles setting the exact pace between dignity and temptation. It wasn't that serene gaze with a fierce spark hidden behind the pupils. When she walked through the door, the entire room turned its head, and my body, for the first time in a long time, felt completely out of my control. I saw her smile at one of the attendants. I saw her hair fall over one shoulder. I saw her lips moisten just before she spoke. And so I did it. What we had agreed. What was allowed. I reached over, grabbed her waist with a firm hand, and kissed her on the cheek. Slow, prolonged, dangerous. The touch was electric. Her perfume, light, floral, like something you couldn't buy in luxury stores, caught in my throat. For a second, I forgot where we were. You look beautiful, I murmured, just enough for her to hear me. She tensed for a second, but she didn't pull away. Is this part of the show? She whispered. It's all part of the show, I replied, still with my lips close to her skin. I turned to the investors, who watched us with polite interest. Valentina greeted with that poise that only women who have learned to survive in environments that did not expect them to have. She was not apologizing for her place. She was claiming it. She talked about clean energy, about water, about research. Her ideas were clear, her arguments solid, and yet what was most impressive was her conviction. That calm fire that made no one doubt her authenticity. And I just stared at her like an idiot, pretending it was because I was keeping our deal. But I wasn't. I wasn't pretending. I held her hand during the meal. I stroked her back as she talked. I tucked a lock of her hair behind her ear, as if I'd done it 1,000 times.
And I wasn't doing it for investors. I was doing it because I wanted to touch her.
Because somehow I needed to touch her. And in a pause between courses, I approached her ear. "You're not acting," I said. She turned to look at me, her mouth just inches away, her eyes a storm. "Neither did you, and I was right." Chapter 8. Accidental Friction. Valentina. To say it was an accident would be a polite way of lying. Elías had offered to accompany me to the turbine monitoring station, an elevated building a few minutes' walk from the complex. He said it was good to be seen together in the field, as if our romance was some kind of organic marketing operation, a staging calibrated to the millimeter to make it look real. I said yes. Not because it was necessary, but because I wanted to be close to him. Even if it was fake, even if it pained me to admit it, even if I knew that this closeness was slowly becoming an ill-calculated risk. The walk was silent. We were both wearing thick jackets, hats, gloves, and yet every time our arms brushed by mistake, my skin burned. The cold could not neutralize the electricity that hovered between us like a latent threat. At the top, a metal staircase surrounded the sensor tower. The view was enormous. White mountains, sharp sky, dry wind. A landscape so immense that it made everything human seem fragile. It was also dangerous. Ice had begun to stick to the steps. The metal slipped like glass under the soles. We climbed anyway. Elías was behind me, attentive, not saying much. "Watch the steps," he said from behind me. And as soon as I finished nodding, the world slid out from under my feet. I slipped. My body went backwards. And Elías caught me. Strong, fast, undeniably masculine. His arms wrapped around my waist. My back bumped against his chest. His warm breath brushed my ear. The air stopped circulating. Time froze with us. We stayed like that, motionless. My heart galloped. His chest rose and fell behind mine. And his hand didn't move. It was on my abdomen, squeezing. And it was there, right there, that I felt it. The bulge in his pants, hard, undeniable, leaning against my back. There was no confusion. It wasn't a generous interpretation. It was real. Instinctive. Brutally honest. My body reacted before my judgment. I barely arched. I felt his hand tremble against my belly. The trembling was not cold. It was something else. Pure desire, barely contained. "Valentina," he murmured, his voice a rough thread of desire. "Yes?" He didn't let go. "If I don't move you now, I'm going to do something that's not in the contract." I turned in his arms. We stood face to face, almost breathing the same air. The snow fell behind him like a stage curtain. All in silence, except for what the body was saying. And for a second, the world was reduced to his mouth. To that mouth that had not yet touched mine, but that I already felt everywhere. My body was screaming yes. My pride not yet. "Then move me," I said, staring at him. "But then, don't look at me like that." "How am I looking at you?" "As if I were already yours." He swallowed. He closed his eyes for a moment. And he let me go. Elías Montenegro never said more than necessary. But his body had just confessed everything. And mine. I was willing to lie for both of us. Chapter 9. Night of Whiskey and Confessions. Elías. The ice melted too slowly in the glass. Or maybe it was me in a hurry to stop thinking. The whiskey in his hand was Scotch, from a cask worth more than one of the technician's truck. I always saved it for meetings with investors. But that night, I poured it unceremoniously, in 2 heavy glasses, one for me and one for her. Valentina was sitting on the other side of the carpet, barefoot, in jogging clothes, with a blanket over her shoulders and her hair down. And yet, she looked more dangerous than when she wore those dresses that made me lose track of what anyone in the room was saying. There was something in her silence, in the way she took the glass without haste, that disarmed any attempt at pretense. She wasn't looking at me with seduction or strategy. She was just there, present, and that, in my world, was an unknown luxury. "I didn't know you were a whiskey drinker," she commented, twirling the glass in her hand. "I didn't know you were one to stay and chat with the boss who asked you to fake a relationship," she smiled. But not really. One of those smiles that look like a private joke with pain. "I guess the things we don't know about others are more interesting than the things we think we know." I took a long drink from the glass. Heat rushed down my chest like a punishment, like a silent confession that burned hotter than any word spoken. "Do you want to know something about me, Valentina? Something you don't know. Something no one asks." She looked at me, attentive. She had that way of looking that is not taught, that is not practiced. She made you feel as if you were important, as if every word could change something. "Yes," she said. I rested the glass on the carpet. I leaned back, legs stretched out. The fireplace cast shadows on the ceiling. The silence was soft, intimate, more dangerous than a caress, more honest than any statement. "My older brother's name was Leon." She said nothing. She waited. "He was the son my old man always wanted. Outgoing, bold, the perfect heir. I was the second, the cerebral one, the one who didn't play rugby or get drunk at events." The air became thicker. My voice did not tremble, but my throat burned. At 22, Leon crashed his car into a pole. He was doing 200. He had been drinking. He died instantly. The silence between sentences was more real than anything I had. More real than the offices, the millions, the future plans. My father did not cry. Do you know what he did? He looked at me and said, "Now it's your turn." The phrase was left floating, suspended between us, a verdict, an invisible and brutal inheritance. Valentina did not offer me pity. No unnecessary, "I'm sorry." She just handed me the glass, to keep me drinking. "And I did," I continued. "I took the damn oil empire, cleaned it up, turned it into this. And yet, there are days when I wake up, and I feel that all this mask of efficiency doesn't belong to me, as if it were still plan B." She moved a little closer, the whiskey reflected in her eyes. "And you," I said more quietly, "what does no one know?" Valentina pursed her lips. She drank. She put the glass aside. "I'm afraid to make it." "To achieve what?" "Everything. The project, the impact, the visibility." "What if I get it, Elías? What if I don't know what to do with it afterwards?" She shrugged her shoulders. But it wasn't indifference. It was vulnerability without a mask. "I'm as afraid of failure as I am of success, because if this goes well, I have no more excuses not to be happy." We stayed like that, looking at each other, breathing. The fire crackled, and inside, everything was burning. If I came a little closer, I kissed her. If she stretched out her hand, I was undone. But we didn't, and somehow that was more intimate than any orgasm. When she went to sleep, she took her glass with her, but she left something worse. The certainty that I was getting into something I no longer knew how to handle. And that, for the first time, I didn't want to control. Chapter 10. She provokes me. Elías. The storm arrived without warning. A polar front of the kind that appears in the news and in the size of hardened locals. The wind whipped the windows with dull gusts, and the snow, which at times seemed like art, was now a wall that erased the world. We had been warned that we could be isolated. We stayed anyway. The hut trembled slightly with each onslaught of nature. Outside, nothing moved that was not white and wild. Inside, the only thing that seemed to pulsate was silence. Elías was standing by the window, hands in his pockets, jaw tense. He stared at the blackness of the forest as if looking for an excuse not to look in. I was behind him, a few steps behind him. I didn't tell him that the secondary generator had failed, that there was no network, that we were alone, no connection,
No chance of anyone interrupting what was about to happen. It was not necessary. We can't leave until it happens, I muttered.
He did not respond. He just nodded his head without turning around. Are you afraid? I asked. Not from the storm, he said. And then he did. He turned around. And I saw it. It was not desire, although it was also desire. It wasn't tenderness, though something similar shone in his gaze. It was delivery. As if at last, he no longer felt like resisting. Elías. I didn't finish saying his name, because he had already crossed the space between us. And he kissed me. Not like in the movies, not as a closure, but as a beginning that hurt. His hands tangled in my hair, my waist, my breath. My body responded before my mind. I embraced him as if I was sinking into him, as if that was my only way to save myself. The kiss was long, awkward, perfect. And when I broke away, my forehead resting against his chest, he whispered, "There's no more pretending, Valentina, nothing." I closed my eyes, and I believed it. Chapter 11. The first real kiss, Valentina. The snowstorm came without warning. Or maybe it warned and we didn't want to listen. The mountains disappeared behind a white veil. The wind whipped the windows of the cabin as if it wanted to tear them out, and we were trapped inside, in a bubble of heat, silence, and something much more dangerous, ourselves. The electricity flickered once, twice, then it died. The fireplace was left as the only source of light, and everything else went out. Logic, distance, rules. Elías rose from his place in front of the window and walked to the fireplace, pouring more wood. His every movement was precise, measured, but not cold. There was something different about him that night. Something surrendered. As if he had finally accepted that control could not protect him from this. His silhouette, outlined against the fire, looked like something out of a fever dream. The flames danced on his skin, drawing shadows on his jaw, on his arms, on the curve of his neck, and I, from the sofa, felt my heart beating in my lips. There was no music, there were no phones, there were no excuses. And for the first time since I came into his world, we weren't boss and intern. We were not a project. We were not a lie. We were two human beings, locked up, lonely, boiling inside. He turned to look at me, dark eyes lit like embers, and my whole body activated without permission. I approached slowly, like someone walking toward an edge they know they will not be able to cross unscathed. Bare feet on the carpet, hands barely trembling, lips already anticipating sin. We stood a meter away from each other, drinking from the silence, breathing the same heavy air. The space between us was electric, magnetic, a border marked only by will. We shouldn't, I muttered. His jaw tensed, his eyes lowered to my lips. The struggle was there, visible, raw. We shouldn't have started this, he replied. But we started? I don't know who took the first step. Maybe it was both of us. Maybe it was the universe leaning forward, fed up with our self-control. The next thing I knew, his mouth was on mine. It was not a polite kiss. It wasn't an experimental rubbing. It was hunger. It was need. It was resignation. His hand held the back of my neck, firm, determined. His other hand grabbed my waist and pressed me against his body, which was all heat, all muscle, all unfulfilled promise. I moaned against his mouth. He growled low, a vibration I felt in my bones. My fingers found his hair, damp from the heat of the fireplace. I tugged at it. He responded by gently biting my lower lip. I arched my back, clinging tighter. There was no gentleness. There was no patience. Just a truth that we had pushed to the limit and could no longer hold. It was brutal. It was beautiful. It was inevitable. And when we parted, our breaths broken, his forehead pressed against mine. This was not in the contract, I whispered. Fuck the contract, he replied, his voice hoarser than ever. I smiled. I closed my eyes. And for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself not to think, just to feel. Chapter 12. Wrinkled sheets. Elías. I woke up at 3 in the morning. Or maybe I wasn't asleep at all. The silence was total. Only the faint crackling of the fireplace came through the wall. And underneath it all, like a silent drum, was her. I knew Valentina was sleeping across the hall. I knew the contract said I was not to touch her unless necessary. But the problem was that I needed her now, like I needed to breathe. I got up, barefoot, shirtless. Only a pair of cotton pants that did not hide the obvious. The house was dark, still warm from the fire, saturated with that dense silence that precedes the inevitable. Each step sounded too loud on the wood, as if the universe was trying to warn me. I walked in the dark to her door. I did not knock. I simply rested my hand on the wood. My head too. I closed my eyes. I breathed her name like a silent prayer. And then the door opened. She was there, wearing a huge t-shirt of mine, barely covering her legs, eyes wide open, pupils dilated, mouth ajar, heart in her face, desire under her skin. She said nothing. She didn't need to. I went inside. The room was small, warm, perfumed with her scent. That smell. A mixture of body cream and something vegetal, simple, clean. I walked to the bed. I sat on the edge. I grabbed her wrist, gently, as if afraid to break it. I pulled her toward me. And then I kissed her. Not like before. Not as someone who wants to try. I kissed her as someone who needed to own her name, her smell, her laughter, her whole existence. Her body fell on top of mine. Her thighs encircled my waist. Her hands tangled in my hair. The heat between us was brutal, a quiet fire, an answered prayer. She moved against me, seeking more, asking for it without words. My hands ran up her thighs, pushing the shirt up. I rubbed her skin, her hips, the edge of her underwear. I felt her shudder, soft, broken in desire. She gasped against my mouth. She pushed me down on the bed. She straddled me. And it was there, right there, that I saw her. Fear. Hidden, small, not toward me, not toward my body, toward what this meant. Toward the irreversible. I sat up, holding her by the waist. We pressed our foreheads together. Her breath against my cheek was trembling. It was supplication. If we go on, I murmured against her hot skin. This is not going to be part of the contract. It's going to be real. She closed her eyes. She trembled. And then, slowly, as if it cost every fiber of her body, she climbed down from on top of me. She sat down next to me, legs crossed, her shirt down her thighs, breathing, agitated, but with a strength that made me respect her more than ever. Not yet, she whispered. I did not move. I didn't protest. I just looked at her. I engraved that image in my memory like an invisible tattoo. I got up, I tucked her in, and I left her room without looking back. But I didn't sleep, because there was something worse than desiring her body, desiring her heart, and knowing that, when the time came, there would be no boundaries to save me. Chapter 13. Jealousy was not in the contract. Valentina. The first mistake was thinking I had it under control. That kiss. That early morning, that almost, could be filed away in a corner of the brain labeled nothing to see. The second mistake was believing that jealousy could be ignored. I saw it a few meters away, in the central courtyard, under the torchlights that illuminated the outdoor dinner organized for the investors. The wooden tables decorated with dried branches, the clinking glasses, the measured smiles of financial diplomacy. Everything seemed perfectly put together, perfectly unreal. And he was not alone. She was tall, blonde, impeccably dressed in a white coat that probably cost more than my annual scholarship.
She had a sharp laugh and a hand resting on Elias's arm as if it belonged to him. Not like he was seeking contact, but as if she was claiming it.
I saw him tense up. I saw him make the almost imperceptible gesture of wanting to shake off that hand. But he didn't, and that split something in my stomach. Something sour. Something that wasn't in any damn contract. Lucia, the assistant, came up behind me. She had been watching everything, as always, as if she knew exactly when the right moment to drop a bomb appeared. Annika Lund, she muttered, as if mentioning a bad omen. Former investor. Former. Something else too. Anything else? You don't have to be Sherlock to understand. Lucia gave me a look of pity disguised as politeness and walked away. No drama, no insistence, just the exact hit. I stared at Elias petrified. I clenched the wine glass until my knuckles ached. The woman, Annika, spoke in his ear. He listened. The tension in his jaw was visible even from my corner as an unwitting observer. She laughed, a private laugh, intimate, a laugh that knew secrets I didn't. And something in me exploded. It was unreasonable. It wasn't part of the deal. But there it was, that bitter heat rising from my chest, closing my throat. I walked toward them before thinking. My legs carried me on their own, as if they had already made a decision that my brain could not process. I arrived at his side, smiling like a mediocre actress playing the woman in love. I took Elias's arm. I leaned against his side. I tilted my head toward him, as if his whole body was mine. Aren't you going to introduce me? I asked with lethal sweetness. It took Elias a split second to react, but when he did, he slipped his arm around my waist with devastating naturalness. The pressure of his hand on my hip jolted me. Annika, this is Valentina Quiroga, my fiancé. The word dropped like a bombshell, not because of the unexpected, but because of the desired. Because of the damn desired. Annika tensed. She smiled. That polite smile that is pure poison, the same one worn by women who never lose, even when they're bleeding to death inside. I'd be delighted, she said, extending her hand to me. Her palm was icy. The pleasure is mine, I answered, lying so well that I got scared. Annika muttered something polite, turned, and walked away, her heels biting the floor like whips. Elias looked at me. The gesture was restrained, but the look said everything that words could not. Thank you, he said quietly. I didn't look at him. I couldn't. Because the cruelest part of all this wasn't having played the fiancé. It was knowing that for a moment I had really wanted it. To have wanted to be that woman. No contracts, no agreements, no end. Just us. Only real. Chapter 14. The first orgasm, Valentina. That night, there was no formal dinner. No speeches, no applause, no forced toasts, just the two of us. Back in the cabin. With a fire in our blood that we could no longer conceal. Elias said nothing as he closed the door behind me. He made no rash moves. He simply approached. He walked slowly, as if the decision weighed on him, as if each step was a sentence written in fire. I stood still by the fire, watching the flames dance in his eyes, and when he stood in front of me, the world became smaller, more real. His smell of wood, of whiskey, of him, surrounded me completely. He didn't ask. He didn't ask permission. He slid his hands down my arms, from my shoulders to my wrists, moving down as if he wanted to memorize me. His touch was patient, reverent, and yet every millimeter ignited something in my skin that I didn't know existed. Then it went even lower, all the way down to my waist, to the edge of my sweater. His fingers found the fabric and slowly lifted it. He took it off slowly. Every inch of fabric that came up was a declaration of war against everything we had tried to resist. I stayed in my bra and jeans, shivering, not from cold, but from something much more primal. an ancient vibration in the bones, a body language that had no translation. He looked at me as if I were art, as if every mark, every curve, every shadow of my body belonged to him. Not with desire alone, but with an unbearable mixture of tenderness and hunger. And then he fell to his knees in front of me. My legs gave out. "I want to see you fall," he whispered, his voice so low I felt more than heard it. He unbuttoned the button of my jeans. He pulled down the zipper. He pulled the fabric down, dragging the underwear down as well. I stood naked from the waist down, vulnerable, trembling, wanting. He didn't rush me. He did not mock. He didn't dominate. He was just patient, delicate, unbearable. He ran his nose along the inside of my thigh. It went up. He almost touched me where I needed him most, but he didn't. He stopped a millimeter away. The anticipation was a beautiful torment. My body searched for contact, desperate. And then finally his mouth found me. A soft kiss, barely a touch. A slow, deep, devastating tongue caress. I groaned. I grabbed onto his shoulders so I wouldn't fall. He mumbled something into my skin that I didn't understand. Something urgent, something sacred. His tongue played, caressed, licked with brutal patience, as if he had all the time in the world, as if he was listening to me from the inside. My hips moved on their own. My breathing got out of control. The pressure grew, unstoppable, wild. And when I reached the edge, when the surge swallowed me, I let out a moan I didn't recognize as my own. I came against his mouth, shuddering, breaking, and he didn't pull away. He held me as I came undone. When the orgasm passed, when my legs were barely supporting me, Elías stood up. He didn't say a word. He hugged me. He wrapped me. He carried me in his arms to the armchair in front of the fire, and there he held me silently, as if I were a secret too precious to be shared. There was no sex yet. There was no penetration. There was no ending. But after that night, we were no longer two people pretending. We were two bodies bound by something that could not be negotiated, something that couldn't be undone, something that was beginning, finally, to really hurt. Chapter 15. I can't fake this, Elías. The problem with desire is that it makes you lie to yourself. It makes you believe that it's physical, that it's momentary, that it's manageable. Until one day you wake up wanting more than her body. You want her voice. You want her laugh. You want the way she wrinkles her nose when something frustrates her. You want everything. And you know, in that brutal moment of lucidity, that no deal can save you. It was early morning when I opened my eyes. The cabin was silent. That thick silence that only comes when the whole world seems to have held its breath. The fireplace was burning its last embers. The shadows danced slowly on the walls. And in the middle of that almost motionless scene, she was there. Valentina slept curled up in a ball on the couch, a blanket falling off one shoulder, her mouth half open in a gesture of vulnerability that broke me in ways I didn't know existed. One knee bent over the cushion, hair in disarray. The t-shirt, my t-shirt, hanging over the side like an involuntary surrender. There was nothing erotic about seeing her like this. There was something much worse. There was tenderness. I got up slowly, without making a sound, as if moving too fast might break the moment, or worse, wake her up before I was ready to let her go. I extinguished the last embers in the fireplace. The creaking of the iron as it closed was the only sound. The cabin was dark again. Just the two of us. She asleep, me trying not to fall apart. I carried her in my arms as if she were made of glass. Light, warm, human. She settled without waking up, exhaling a small sigh that hit me straight in the chest. I took her to her bed. I settled her under the sheets carefully, smoothing the blankets as a futile act of affection. I stood beside her, looking at her, unmoving. I wanted to touch her cheek. I wanted to tell her that she was killing me. I did not. I went to the bathroom. I closed the door. I rested my hands against the cold marble. My reflection looked back at me, and I knew. It wasn't just sex. It wasn't just the tension of a shared month. It wasn't the contract. It wasn't the pressure. It wasn't the cold or the loneliness or the need to redeem myself to the world. It was her. It was Valentina. I closed my eyes. And then for the first time in years, I let go. I touched myself thinking of her, not her body, not her moans, in the way she looked at me when she thought I didn't see her, in the way her fingers trembled slightly when she took my hand in public, in how her voice would barely lower when she said my name without witnesses, in how she disarmed me with her very existence. I came fast, hard, almost in rage. But I didn't feel liberated. I felt empty. Because I knew, deep inside, that an orgasm was not going to get her off me, that I could no longer separate her from me, that I wanted her in, out, all around, that I was fucking in love, and that when it was all over, when the deal expired and she walked out of my life, it was going to be my doom. One that I deserved, for believing, even for a second, that I could play with her without getting burned. Chapter 16. A lie that burns. Valentina. The snowstorm subsided, but another storm, quieter, dirtier, was forming just above us. I knew it when I saw the cameras. First, a couple of flashes in the distance as we were leaving the complex. Then, an overly well-informed journalist at the front desk of the hotel where the investors were staying. Professional smile. Loaded questions. Eyes too wide awake. And then, the final blow. An anonymous email in my inbox. No sender, no explanation, just an attachment. One photo. From our contract. The signed agreement, the terms and conditions, my name, his name. The evidence that our whole story was a sham. I felt my stomach empty in a second. The ringing in my ears. The urge to close the computer as if it would erase the truth. Everything all right? Elías asked, seeing me turn pale. I didn't answer. I just turned the screen toward him. His expression changed. It wasn't surprise. It was anger. Pure, cold. The kind you don't shout. The kind you swallow whole. He picked up the laptop and slammed it shut. The click sounded like a gunshot. Who has access to this? I asked, my voice trembling. Just Andrea, he said, referring to his image lawyer. And maybe Lucia, if she snooped around a little too much. But I doubt that. And the ex, I interrupted him. He stopped. That extra second, that microscopic pause, but I saw it, the doubt. Annika. Yes, Annika, the one who smiled at you as if she knew you from the inside. His eyes darkened. No access. What if she ever did? What if you never stopped being the guy everyone thinks you are? I hated myself for saying it. I hated myself for even thinking it could be true. But the fear, the shame, the pain, it was all mixing in my throat like acid. Elías took a step toward me. Instinctively, I stepped back. Valentina! What? I snapped. What are you going to tell me now? That everything is still under control? That it's just another collateral damage? He clenched his fists. Not out of anger at me. Out of impotence. Of that mute fury that only those who are losing something they don't know how to hold back have. I didn't want it to turn out like this, he muttered. Of course not. I laughed bitter. You wanted your image cleaned up, your project approved, your damn redemption. What about me? What am I in all this? Just another token. Tolerable collateral damage. His eyes burned. He opened his mouth to speak. I didn't let him. I don't want to hear it, I said, stepping back. I don't want your perfect explanations. I don't want your hands, your promises, your guilt. I turned around. I went out. I didn't cry until I was alone, among the frozen trees, where the cold was so brutal I could blame it on the tears. I didn't cry because he had used me. I cried because, in some absurd place in my heart, I had begun to believe that everything false could become real, that he could love me, that I could save myself, Another lie. The most dangerous of all. Chapter 17. I fell in love with you, Elias. I searched for her like a condemned man searches for the lost crack of light in a dark cell. Not in the lab, nor in the library, nor in the courtyard. Valentina had evaporated. Lucia, her face one of efficient desperation, reached for my coat as she muttered something about image damage, crisis protocols, lawyers, and other words that sounded like mosquitoes buzzing in my ears. I didn't listen to her. I just went out. The snow had stopped. The forest was a white mausoleum, deserted, silent. Each branch looked like an icy scar on an inert body. My breathing was the only human sound for miles. I walked, following footprints. Small, light footprints that barely broke the frozen surface. I counted them. I felt them. I chased them with my heart in my throat. Until I found her. She was sitting on a fallen log, arms around her knees, head bowed. She looked like a statue of sadness. So still that for a second I thought I would break just looking at her. I approached slowly. I knew I could come apart. I knew I could scream, but I couldn't stop trying. I knelt in front of her. The snow crunched under my knees. There was no speech. There was no strategy. She raised her head, and her eyes were two daggers stuck in my chest. "What do you want, Elías?" she whispered. I swallowed hard. I wasn't ready for this. I was never ready for it. "To tell you the truth," I said. She laughed, bitter, broken. "Now, after all?" I nodded. There was no pride worth saving. "When I proposed the deal to you, I thought I could control it," I admitted. "I thought I could fake it." She looked down. Tears trembled on her eyelashes. They weren't falling. They were just there, hanging, holding on. "But I couldn't," I continued. "Not after meeting you. Not after hearing you talk about your mother. After seeing you smile when you thought no one was looking. I fell in love with you, Valentina. And not all the money, not all the fear, not all my history could prevent it. The silence was brutal. So much so that it almost suffocated me." She didn't move. She said nothing, but something in her body vibrated, a sigh that hadn't been born. "I'm not asking you to believe me," I added. "I'm asking you to look me in the eye and tell me if what you felt was a lie too." She looked up. And in that broken gaze, I saw the only answer that mattered. Valentina Quiroga had loved me. She loved me. Even if fear still held her back. Even if everything around her had taught her to doubt love. "I love you," I said, unadorned. "No contract, no conditions, no limits." I knelt in the snow, waiting, knowing I could lose her, knowing I could do nothing but put my heart in her hands and hope she wouldn't drop it. And then she leaned toward me. She pressed her forehead against mine. "Me too," she whispered. And everything that had been broken inside me was repaired all at once. In the only way that matters, with love, real, non-negotiable, eternal. Chapter 18. Discovery, Valentina. Loving him was easy. The hard part was deciding if we were worth fighting for out loud. When Elías told me he loved me, something in me broke. And at the same time, something healed. As if his voice was the only medicine I didn't know I needed. But the world was not going to forgive us so easily. We walked back to the cabin together, side by side, breathing the same thick air of unspoken words. None of us hurried the pace. As if every meter gained towards the inevitable was a silent negotiation with fear. Lucia was waiting for us at the door, with the gravest face I had ever seen. The cold had reddened her nose, but not her eyes, which were pure steel. "It came to light," she said without preamble. She showed us her tablet. The headlines paraded on the screen like a funeral procession. Elías Montenegro, the fraudulent romance that shakes the business world. Contract, deceit and betrayal.
The scandal behind the new green project. The intern who fell in love and swindled. Argentina's most controversial heir. My stomach twisted. Not out of shame, not out of guilt, out of helplessness.
The noise of the world had entered through the cracks of our history, and now it threatened to uproot it. "They're going to want your resignation, Elias," said Lucia in a low voice. "They're going to ask for your head on a platter. The Northern Project, the European Council, the investors, everything." "What about her?" he asked without looking at me. "She's going to be dragged in as well. She's going to be portrayed as an opportunist, as a gold digger." The words hit me like whips. Swindler, ambitious, climbing. I wasn't prepared for that. Not to see my name reduced to trash on news portals. Not to be dehumanized by headlines that would never understand what we had lived through. I turned to Elias. His eyes were fixed on me. Still, burning, an anchor in the midst of chaos. "I will not let them destroy you," he said, firm, absolute. "You can't help it," I answered. "I'm not going to hide you," he added. And then I knew. He was willing to burn everything, his reputation, his project, his future, if it meant not losing me. It was too much, and at the same time, it was exactly what I needed. "What are we going to do?" I asked. Elias let the air out in a slow sigh. "Decide if we want to be the truth, even if it hurts." I remained silent. Was it worth it? Was it worth it to face stares, insults, venomous headlines, for something that no one else understood, but that we felt in our skin, in our blood? The answer came to me with brutal clarity. Yes, of course it did. "I am with you," I said. He closed his eyes for a second, as if that phrase were a life preserver thrown in the middle of a shipwreck. When he opened them, the world seemed to reposition itself around us. We were going to fight. It was going to hurt. But it was real, and that changed everything. Chapter 19. Silence in the hut. Elias. The world could wait. The media chaos, the nervous investors, the calls from lawyers and crisis consultants. It was all background noise. She was the center. She was the storm and the calm. I saw her asleep in bed, wrapped in a blanket, her face relaxed, unafraid, for the first time in days. She had one hand open on the pillow, as if even asleep she was ready to hold something, or to let go. And I knew what I had to do. It was no longer about cleaning up my image, nor about saving a project, nor about proving anything to a dead father. It was about being worthy of us. I dressed in silence. I took my brother's old watch out of the drawer, the one I never wore, and put it on as if it were a suit of armor. Not out of superstition, out of memory, out of courage. And I went out. The impromptu press conference in the complex's auditorium was a theater of shadows and knives. Cameras flashed. Microphones stretched out like hungry snakes. Journalists were sharp eyes disguised as curiosity. I stood in front of the lectern. No written speech, no advisors in my ear, no Lucia breathing instructions. Lucia looked at me from the side, pale, like someone witnessing a public execution. I knew this was not tactical. I knew it was suicidal. The murmur died down as I picked up the microphone. The air became thick. Every lens pointed at me like a rifle. "I will not deny anything you have seen," I said. An uneasy murmur crossed the room. Flash, flash, flash. Yes, I signed an agreement with Valentina Quiroga. An agreement that, initially, had strategic purposes. More cameras, more flashes. One journalist put her hand to her mouth. Another looked down at his tablet as if updating hell in real time. But what was born out of that agreement was not planned. It was not faked. I stopped. I breathed. And I looked straight into the main camera, as if I were talking to her, to Valentina, to everything we had promised each other in silence. I fell in love with Valentina Quiroga, with her honesty, her strength, her humanity. More murmurs. Some of disbelief, others of discomfort. A producer mouthed cut to his cameraman. No one obeyed. And if that means losing your approval, losing your funding, losing the project, I accept the consequences. The room was silent, not out of respect, out of bewilderment. I dropped the microphone on the lectern with a sharp blow, a sound so final it needed no reply. I did not wait for questions. I did not accept replies. I offered no excuses. I got off the stage. I walked toward the exit amidst the stunned silence of everyone present. Every step was a sentence. Every step was a declaration of war on everything I had built. But it didn't matter, because I knew who I was going to meet on the other side. And I knew that, this time, it was real. Chapter 20. Letter from the South. Valentina. I didn't know what I had done until I saw it on the airport TV. The broadcast was on every channel. Elías, alone in front of the lectern, confessing to the world what neither of us had dared to say out loud until now. I fell in love with Valentina Quiroga. My heart stopped. Not the typical empty phrases, no image-washing strategy, no excuses, just the truth. Raw, dirty, beautiful. And the worst, or the best, was that he didn't apologize for it. He didn't apologize for loving me. The sound of his voice was still vibrating in my chest, even when the transmission ended. On the screen, a reporter began to repeat the details, to analyze his tone, his gestures, the communicational risk. But I could only think of him. I could only think of that sentence, spoken to the world as if it didn't hurt. When the video ended, I stared at my reflection in the window pane. The snow was falling slowly behind the glass. A quiet white postcard that didn't match the chaos inside me. My plane to Buenos Aires was announced on the screen. Flight 728. Gate 9. Last call. The perfect escape. I could go back, to my former life, to my safe mediocrity, to the comfort of risking nothing. Or I could stay, fight, love him. My phone vibrated. It was a message from Lucia. Elías left this for you. An accompanying image, a handwritten letter. His handwriting, recognizable, serious, a little shaky. Valentina, I don't know if you will want to read me after all. I don't know if any words can repair the damage, but I want you to know that I don't care about the scandal, or the press, or the investors who turned their backs on me. I care about the way you looked at me when you thought I didn't see you. I care about your laughter. I care about the cold you felt and that you never asked for a coat. I care about you. I'll wait for you at the cabin, if you want. If not, I will still love you the same, even if you don't come back. The letter fell from my hands. I picked it up as if it was something fragile, sacred, a physical proof of something I had already written inside, an undemanding promise. I looked at the airport screen. Flight 728 Buenos Aires final boarding. I could get on. I could leave. Or I could run to him. I chose to run. Chapter 21. One last presentation, Valentina. I ran as if the ground was on fire. There were no cabs. There was no time. Just legs, freezing air, heart out of control. The wind cut my cheeks, but my body didn't register the cold. It was just moving forward. I just knew I had to get there. As if each step on the snow was an act of faith. When I arrived at the complex, most of the investors had already gathered in the auditorium for the closing event. There were banners, sound equipment, cameras, a stage I never thought I'd get on from this emotional place. Elías was not among them. No one knew where he was. I almost stumbled up the stairs. The sign with my name on it was taped to the lectern next to the other speakers. My name was on the list of presenters. I had forgotten it. Or maybe I had denied it. Out of fear, out of attrition, out of feeling small. My project, water treatment in rural communities, was to be presented just before the closing toast. The most symbolic part, the most fragile. Lucia intercepted me before entering. her face for the first time, without the veil of control. "Are you sure?" she asked, her eyes wide, frightened. "They're all there. The press, the investors, the NGO directors." "Yes," I said, safer than ever. I stood in front of the microphone. The auditorium was packed. Hundreds of attentive faces, some curious, some wary. I knew they didn't see a young engineer presenting a green solution. They saw the scandal scholar, the opportunist, the imposter. I took a deep breath, and I spoke. "Good morning. My name is Valentina Quiroga. I come from a neighborhood where clean water was a luxury and dreams were an improbable statistic. I watched as some of them shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Perfect. I am here to present a water treatment project based on low-cost filtration systems. I am not here because someone put me here. I am not here because I signed a paper. I am here because I broke my soul to get here." I saw heads rise. I saw eyebrows arch. I saw prejudices tremble. "And if any of you think that my story or my feelings invalidate my work, I invite you to read the attached technical report," I added, sliding a folder onto the table. "There are the facts, the numbers, the science." Pause, breathing. "And if you still think I'm not enough?" "It doesn't matter. I'm not here to please. I am here to change something." I left the microphone. The silence was absolute, a dense silence, cutting, like before a storm. But it wasn't a storm. It was the beginning of something. And then, a round of applause. First one, then another, and then the whole auditorium, on their feet. Not out of pity, not out of obligation, out of respect. I came down from the stage trembling, not from fear, from relief. And there he was, Elías, leaning against the back wall, with his hands in his pockets and his eyes shining, as if he had just seen a miracle, as if I were that miracle. I ran to him. I jumped into his arms. He kissed me without asking permission, like someone who claims what is his. And in that kiss, in that laughter, in that embrace, I knew we had won. Not against the world, not against the press, against ourselves, against fear, against the lie. We had won. Chapter 22. This kiss is real, Elías. When I kissed her in front of everyone, I didn't think about the press or the investors or the contracts that were unraveling like wet paper. I thought of her laughter against my lips. I thought of the trembling of her body as she jumped into my arms. I thought about the impossible miracle of having found something real in the midst of so much garbage. We left the auditorium as if we had stolen something valuable, and in a sense, we had the right to be ourselves. We climbed up to the cabin almost running. The snow was falling in fat, soft flakes like late blessings. The cold didn't matter, neither did the future. Only us, covered by a world that finally seemed to be silent. We went inside, closed the door, and then I looked at her. She was panting, her eyes dilated, her whole body vibrating like a rope about to break, as if all that had been contained until now, the fear, the rage, the love, had run out of places to hide. I approached. I slid my hands under her coat. I dropped it on the floor. She did the same with mine. We looked at each other. No rush this time, no animal urgency. This time it was different. This time it was love. I brought my hands to her face. I ran along her jaw, her neck, her exposed collarbone. The texture of her skin under my fingers was an unspoken prayer. She closed her eyes. She surrendered. I slipped the straps of her dress. I let it fall slowly, like a silent offering. Every inch of her skin was a poem written in flesh. Every curve, every shadow, every mark that made her unique. I kissed her shoulders, her arms, the perfect curve of her back. She trembled under my lips. It was not sex. It wasn't conquest. It was devotion. I lifted her in my arms. I carried her to the bed. I placed her between the sheets like someone guarding a treasure.
not as something fragile, as something sacred. I undressed slowly, without losing eye contact. She looked at me as if I were everything she had ever wanted and had never allowed herself to ask for. And I felt that for the first time, it was enough. It was deserved. I lay on top of her. We fit together as if we were made for it.
Our bodies spoke a language that needed no translation, one that only we understood, one that was not learned, it was remembered. I entered her slowly, deep, without breaking the contact of our gazes. As if to stop looking at her was to break the magic. As if the soul needed to see too. She moaned under my mouth. I closed my eyes for a second, savoring the privilege, the miracle of being inside her, of belonging to her in a way that no signature could ever register. We moved together, without haste, without fear, with the certainty of those who no longer have anything to prove, only to feel. When she came, she cried, not of sadness, of relief, of love. I followed her, falling beside her, inside her, like a prayer whispered into the ear of a merciful God. There was no lie in us, only truth, only love, only eternity. Epilogue. 1 year later, Valentina, Bariloche, autumn. Outside, the forest was tinged with copper and fire. Leaves rustled under the trees, blown by a gentle wind that seemed to sweep everything with delicacy. The sky had that milky gray tone that announced slow rains, the kind that do not bother. Inside, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled our cabin, the same cabin where it all began. Although now it was different. Now it was ours. Elías was in the kitchen, shirtless, making coffee as if he didn't know he was slowly killing me with every moving muscle. His movements were slow, sure. His shoulders relaxed, his hair disheveled, that way of his of existing without asking permission from the world. I watched him from the sofa, with a smile that I could not, nor wanted to hide. One of those smiles that don't make a sound, but that you can feel in your bones. A year had passed since that scandal, since that press conference, since that mutual election. It was not easy. We lost investors. We changed partners. We had to start over from scratch. But in the end, it didn't matter. We founded a new foundation. Smaller, more honest, more ours. I had managed to install my first water treatment plant in a rural community in Mendoza. I had traveled. I had cried from exhaustion. I had received hugs from women who, like my mother, had spent too much time washing fears away with dirty water. And Elías had found something that was worth more than any project: peace. My mother, thanks to better funded treatment, was stable. She smiled more. She coughed less. And she said, "I told you so," every time we talked. And I was happy, really happy. No shortcuts, no bargaining, happy. Elías approached me with 2 cups. He held one out to me. The warmth of the coffee between my hands, the warmth of him on my chest. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, sitting down next to me. "In us." He smiled, that slight, almost secret smile that still disarmed me. "Sorry, never." I leaned against his chest. I listened to his heart, steady and calm, like the anchor it had been in the midst of my storm. He set his cup down on the table. He reached over to a small drawer next to the couch. He pulled out a box. Small, dark blue, classic. My stomach turned over. I sat up. I looked at him. He opened it. Inside, a simple, elegant ring. Silver. A small diamond in the center, as a promise rather than an ostentation. "I don't want a contract," he said, his voice hoarse, barely quivering. "No," I replied, smiling through my tears. "I want a yes." "Yes," I whispered before he could finish. He laughed. That low, intimate laugh that was mine alone. He put the ring on me. He kissed me. And I knew there was nothing more to look for, nothing more to prove. Just us, the fire, the winter, The love, forever.